It was narrated that Talha ibn Ubaydillah said, "A man from Najd came to the Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, with disheveled hair. The rise and fall of his voice could be heard, but his words could not be understood until he came close. It turned out that he was asking about Islam. The Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, said, 5 prayers every day and night. The man said, "Is anything else required of me?" He said, "No, unless you do it voluntarily." The Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, said, "And fasting Ramadan." He said, "Is anything else required of me?" He said, "No, unless you do it voluntarily." Then the Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, mentioned zakah. And the man said, "If anything else require me?" He said, "No, unless you do it voluntarily." Then the man turned away, saying, "By Allah, I shall do no more than that and no less." The Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, said, "He will succeed if he is telling the truth." Commentary. Being assiduous in doing everything prescribed in Islam and carrying out its pillars in the proper manner with sincerity is the path to success and prosperity and a means of salvation from the terrors of the day of resurrection. In this hadith, Talha ibn Ubaydillah, may Allah be pleased with him, narrates that a man from Najd, which is a region of Arabia between the Hijaz and Iraq, came to the Prophet, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him. That man was Daimam ibn Thalaba. His hair was unkempt because of the rigors of travel, and he had a loud voice. But nothing he said could be understood until he drew close to the Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him. It turned out that he was asking about the teachings of Islam, so the Prophet, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, responded by explaining that the first duty of Islam that was required of him was the 5 prayers, which are to be offered every day and night. He said, "Do I have to offer any prayers other than these 5 prayers?" The Prophet, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, replied, "You do not have to offer any other prayers, unless you voluntarily do some of the regular Sunnah and other Sunnah prayers, which are encouraged, must-have, and you will be rewarded for doing them, but you will not be punished for not doing them." Then the Prophet, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, told him that he had to fast Ramadan. Fasting means refraining, with intention of worship, from food, drink, sexual activity, and other things that break the fast, from the break of dawn until the sun sets. He said, "Do I have to do anything else?" He said, "You do not have to do anything else, unless you do it voluntarily, fasting some days other than Ramadan, for they are encouraged, and you will be rewarded for doing that." Then the Prophet, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, told him about zakah, which is an obligatory financial act of worship to be given on every type of wealth that meets the minimum threshold, as defined in Islamic teachings, when 1 full lunar or Hijri year has passed since acquiring that wealth, giving 1/4 of 1/10. One should also give zakah on anam animals, camels, cattle, and sheep and other livestock, zakah on crops, fruits, and trade goods, and zakah on rikaz, which is buried treasure that is brought out of the earth, and it was said minerals and metals on the basis of their nisab minimum threshold, to be given at the time at which their zakah becomes due. Giving zakah in the proper manner to those who are entitled to it brings increased blessing, barakah, to wealth, and brings great reward in the hereafter, whereas being stingy and withholding it from those who are entitled to it brings bad consequences in this world and the hereafter, as has been explained in many texts of the Quran and Sunnah. Zakah is to be given to those who are entitled to it, who are mentioned in the verse. Zakah expenditures are only for the poor and for the needy, and for those employed to collect zakah, and for bringing hearts together for Islam, and for freeing captives or slaves, and for those in debt, and for the cause of Allah, and for the stranded traveler, an obligation imposed by Allah. And Allah is knowing and wise. Al-Taba 9 hours 60 minutes. The man asked, "Do I have to do anything other than that?" He said, "No, unless you give something else in charity voluntarily, and you will be rewarded for that, but it is not obligatory, and you will not be sinning if you do not do it." Then the man turned and left, swearing by Allah that he would not do any supererogatory, nafil deeds in addition to these obligatory duties, and he would not omit any of them. The Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, said, "He will succeed if he is speaking the truth." In other words, if he means what he says and he does these pillars of Islam sincerely for the sake of Allah, may he be exalted, then he will attain paradise and be saved from the fire, even if he does not do any supererogatory actions. This hadith indicates that if a person limits himself to the obligatory religious duties as prescribed in the religious text, then he will succeed, but this does not mean that it is not prescribed for him to do some voluntary acts of worship, because the voluntary actions will complete the obligatory actions and make up for any shortcomings in them on the day of resurrection.